Chapter 1. Candice's world. Candice Allen stared at the glowing screen, the cursor blinking like it was mocking her exhaustion. Midnight had come and gone, and the office was silent except for the hum of the HVAC and the occasional clack of her keyboard. She stretched her arms overhead, feeling the familiar ache in her shoulders. Another late night. Another project saved from the brink of disaster. Another reminder that her career was thriving, while her personal life was on life support. She leaned back in her chair, letting out a sigh that could have powered a wind turbine. Romance, she muttered under her breath, is a luxury item, like yachts, or avocado toast in 2016. Her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen. Mom. Of course. Candice swiped to answer. Hey, Mom. Candice? Sweetheart. Do you know what time it is? Her mother's voice was warm but laced with that familiar tone, the one that meant brace yourself for unsolicited advice. Yes, Candice said, swiveling in her chair. It's late. I'm working. Working, her mom repeated, as if the word were a foreign concept. Honey, you're 27. You can't marry your job. Candice pinched the bridge of her nose. I'm not trying to marry my job. I'm trying to keep it from divorcing me. Her mom chuckled. Cute. But listen, your father and I were talking. Oh no, Candice groaned. Not the parental summit. And we think you should start putting yourself out there. A husband isn't going to be delivered by Santa Claus. Candice smirked. Santa's been slacking for years. Candice. Mom. I barely have time to sleep, let alone date. And even if I did, where exactly am I supposed to find these mythical reliable men? Because I know where all the players are, dating apps and clubs, neither of which I use. Her mom sighed dramatically. You're too picky. I'm not picky, Candice said, swiveling back to her screen. I have two deal breakers. Just two. One, they need to have their life together. I'm not interested in a fixer-upper. Two, loyalty. Non-negotiable. I've been cheated on enough times to qualify for a loyalty program. Her mom laughed softly. You're impossible. I'm practical, Candice corrected. If someone asks for trust without giving me a reason, what they're asking for is faith, not trust. There was a pause. You sound like a TED Talk. Thanks, Candice said dryly. I'll add that to my resume. Fine. Her mom relented. But promise me you'll at least try. Candice hesitated. I'll think about it. That's mom code for no. But I'll take it. Good night, sweetheart. Night, Mom. Candice hung up and stared at her reflection in the darkened window. Her own words echoed back at her. I'll think about it. She wanted companionship. She wasn't a robot. But the idea of diving into the dating pool felt like volunteering for a Shark Tank. Her phone buzzed again. This time, a text from Lena, her best friend since high school. Lena. Still at work? Candice. Yep. Living the dream. Lena. Your dream needs better hours. Drinks this weekend? Candice. If I survive this deadline. Lena. You will. And maybe you'll meet someone who isn't allergic to commitment. Candice. Ha. Where? The bar? That's where commitment goes to die. Lena. Optimism looks good on you. Try it sometime. Candice smiled despite herself. Lena was relentless, but in a good way. Still, optimism felt like a luxury too. Like yachts and avocado toast. She closed her laptop with a decisive snap. Enough for tonight. As she gathered her things, she imagined what it would be like to have someone waiting at home. Someone who wasn't a cat, because she didn't even have time for a cat. Someone who understood that trust was earned, not demanded. Someone who didn't think loyalty was optional. She locked the office door behind her and stepped into the cool night air. The city lights glittered like a promise she wasn't sure she believed in. Somewhere out there, maybe, was a man who wasn't glued to TikTok, who didn't think ghosting was a personality trait, and who knew that love wasn't a game. But tonight, all she wanted was a hot shower and a cup of tea. Chapter 2. Chris's perspective. Chris Bennett stared at his phone like it had personally betrayed him. Another dating app notification. Another profile that looked like a TikTok audition. He thumbed the screen, scrolling past duckface selfies and captions like, fluent in sarcasm and iced coffee. He muttered under his breath, is it really so hard to find a woman who isn't glued to TikTok? The app chirped cheerfully. You have a new match. Chris groaned. Fantastic. Another person who thinks loyalty is a dog breed. He tossed the phone onto the cafe table and rubbed his temples. The smell of roasted coffee beans should have been comforting, but lately it just reminded him of all the first dates that ended in awkward silences or worse, ghosting. Across from him, his friend Nate grinned like a man who enjoyed watching train wrecks. You look like someone who just found out his favorite sports team moved to Mars. Chris shot him a look. I'm deleting these apps. They're a dumpster fire. Nate shrugged. You're too picky. Chris snorted. I'm not picky. I'm sane. I want someone who's down to earth, not someone who thinks life is a series of Instagram stories. Maybe you should lower your standards, Nate teased. Chris leaned back in his chair. Lower my standards? That's how you end up on a reality show called Why Did I Marry This Person? Nate laughed so hard he nearly spilled his latte. Okay, fair. But seriously, what's your deal breaker? Chris counted on his fingers. 1. Respect. 2. Loyalty. 3. No drama. I've had enough humiliation and rejection to last a lifetime. When people show you who they are, believe them the first time. Nate raised his cup in mock salute. Deep. You should put that on a mug. Chris smirked. I'll add it to my merch line. His phone buzzed again, this time a work email. Relief washed over him. Finally, something that didn't involve emojis or awkward small talk. He scanned the message. A client wanted to meet at a networking event tomorrow. Great. At least that was predictable. Work stuff? Nate asked. Yeah, Chris said, finishing his coffee. Networking event. Maybe I'll meet someone who speaks in full sentences. Nate grinned. Optimism looks good on you. Try it sometime. Chris rolled his eyes but smiled anyway. He wasn't hopeless, just cautious. He wanted a family someday. But the dating market felt like a horror movie with bad lighting. Still, maybe tomorrow would be different. Maybe he'd meet someone who didn't treat loyalty like an optional feature. As he left the cafe, Chris shoved his phone into his pocket and made himself a promise. No more chasing people who didn't value the same things. If love was out there, it had to start with respect. And maybe, just maybe, a decent conversation that didn't involve TikTok dances. Chapter 3. The Almost Meet. Candice Allen hated networking events with the fiery passion of 1,000 suns. They were loud, crowded, and filled with people who thought synergy was a personality trait. But her boss had insisted, and saying no wasn't an option. Not when she was up for a promotion. She stepped into the hotel ballroom, heels clicking against polished marble, and immediately regretted her choice of footwear. The room buzzed with chatter, laughter, and the clinking of glasses. Candice adjusted her blazer, pasted on her best professional smile, and scanned the crowd for someone she actually knew. Her phone vibrated. A text from Lena. Lena, smile like you're having fun. Pretend if you have to. Candice smirked and typed back. Candice, I'm smiling so hard my face hurts. Send help. She slipped the phone into her clutch and headed toward the refreshment table. If she was going to suffer through this, she deserved a glass of wine. Or 3. Across the room, Chris Bennett was having his own internal monologue about how much he despised these events. He tugged at his tie, wondering if strangulation by neckwear counted as a valid excuse to leave early. His client had insisted he attend, and Chris wasn't about to jeopardize a contract, but small talk was his personal version of purgatory. He grabbed a coffee from the beverage station, silently judging the wine drinkers. Networking plus alcohol equals bad decisions, he thought. He turned, scanning the crowd for his client, and that's when he saw her. Candice. He didn't know her name yet, but something about her caught his attention. The way she stood with quiet confidence, not desperate to impress like half the room. She looked grounded, real, and completely out of his league, probably. Chris shook off the thought. He wasn't here to flirt. He was here to work. Still, his eyes lingered a second too long before he forced himself to move toward the client table. Candice, oblivious to the silent observation, was busy trying not to spill her wine while balancing a plate of hors d'oeuvres. She hated finger food. Who decided tiny skewers were elegant? She maneuvered through the crowd, muttering under her breath. If I survive this without stabbing myself with a toothpick, it'll be a miracle. Careful there, a voice said behind her. Candice turned, startled, and nearly collided with a man holding a coffee cup. Tall, dark hair, sharp suit. His smile was polite, not flirty, thank God. Sorry, she said quickly, steadying her plate. These skewers are a hazard. He chuckled. Occupational hazard of networking events. She smiled faintly, then nodded and moved on. She didn't have time for small talk. Not tonight. Her boss was expecting her to mingle with potential partners, not chat with random strangers who happened to have nice smiles. Chris watched her walk away, resisting the urge to kick himself. That was his opening and he blew it. But maybe it was for the best. He wasn't here to complicate his life with what-ifs. Later, as Candice stood near the stage pretending to be fascinated by a presentation on market trends, her phone buzzed again. Lena, of course. Lena. Any cute guys? Candice glanced around, her eyes landing briefly on the man from earlier, now deep in conversation with someone else. Candice. Define cute. Lena. The kind that makes you forget your wine. Candice smirked. Well, there was one. But I'm not here for that. She slipped the phone away and focused on the speaker, unaware that across the room, Chris was thinking the exact same thing. There was one. But I'm not here for that. Chapter 4. Candice's pushback. Candice collapsed onto her couch like a marathon runner crossing the finish line. Her heels landed somewhere near the coffee table. Her blazer was draped over the armrest, and her dignity was hanging by a thread. Networking events were supposed to be fun, according to her boss. Fun for who? Extroverts? Masochists? She grabbed her phone and dialed Lena. It rang twice before her best friend answered with her usual enthusiasm. Tell me everything, Lena said. Was there wine? Was there drama? Was there a man who made you forget your own name? Candice snorted. There was wine, no drama. And as for the man, define forget your own name. Oh ho, Lena's voice perked up. So there was someone. Candice rolled her eyes, sinking deeper into the couch cushions. Barely. We bumped into each other near the food table. He smiled. I smiled. End of story. Was he cute? Candice hesitated. He was decent. Decent. Lena gasped. Candice Allen, queen of high standards, calls a man decent? That's practically a marriage proposal. Candice laughed. Please. I'm not looking for a project, remember? And loyalty is non-negotiable. 2 deal breakers. That's it. Right? Lena said, her tone teasing. Because you're allergic to fixer-uppers and cheaters. Exactly, Candice said, reaching for the throw blanket. I've been cheated on enough times to qualify for a loyalty program. Lena cackled. You should trademark that line. Candice smiled faintly, but her mind wandered back to the man at the event. The one with the polite smile and the coffee cup. He didn't seem like a player. But then again, appearances were deceiving. She'd learned that the hard way. Anyway, Candice said, shaking off the thought, I'm not diving into the dating pool just because my mom thinks Santa's running late. Your mom's right, though, Lena said. You're not going to meet anyone if you keep hiding behind spreadsheets. Candice groaned. I'm not hiding. I'm working. Same thing, Lena shot back. Look, I'm not saying download a dating app and start swiping like a maniac. But maybe, be open to possibilities. Candice stared at the ceiling. Possibilities sound exhausting. Possibilities sound like wine and laughter, and maybe someone who brings you tea when you're stressed. Candice chuckled softly. You make it sound easy. It's not easy, Lena admitted. But it's worth it. You deserve someone who gets you. Candice didn't respond right away. She thought about loyalty, trust, and the quiet ache she carried. The one that whispered late at night that maybe, just maybe, she wanted more than career milestones. Fine, she said finally. I'll think about it. That's Lena code for I'm winning, her friend said smugly. Now go take a bubble bath and stop pretending you're a robot. Candice laughed, ending the call. She curled up under the blanket, her mind replaying the brief encounter at the event. His smile had been nice, warm even, but she wasn't about to read into it. Not yet. Still, as she drifted off to sleep, one thought lingered. What if possibilities aren't as exhausting as I think? Chapter 5. Chris's curiosity. Chris Bennett stared at his laptop screen, pretending to focus on the quarterly report in front of him. Numbers blurred into meaningless shapes as his mind replayed last night's networking event. The clinking glasses, the endless buzz of conversation, and her. The woman with the quiet confidence and the wine glass. He didn't even know her name, but something about her had stuck. Not in the usual way, like she's pretty, but in the way that made him wonder what her laugh sounded like when she wasn't forcing a polite smile for strangers. He shook his head, trying to snap out of it. He wasn't here to daydream. He had work to do. Still, the thought lingered like a song stuck on repeat. Across his desk, his phone buzzed. Nate, of course. Nate, so, did you meet anyone who speaks in full sentences? Chris smirked and typed back. Chris. Maybe. Nate. Maybe? That's practically a love confession. Bill. Chris, we didn't talk. Just bumped into each other. She smiled. I smiled. End of story. Nate. Sounds like fate. Or bad networking skills. Chris chuckled. Bad networking skills, he thought. That sounded about right. He leaned back in his chair, debating. Should he try to find her? It wasn't like he had her number or even her name, but she had been near the partner table, which meant she was probably in the same industry. Maybe even connected to the client he'd met. Chris opened his email, scanning through the follow-ups from the event. One subject line caught his eye. Great meeting you at the networking event. It was from the client, thanking him for his time and mentioning a few other attendees. He clicked, skimmed, and there it was. A name. Candice Allen. Chris said it out loud, testing the sound. Candice. It fit her somehow, elegant but strong. He felt a ridiculous surge of triumph, like he'd just solved a mystery. Now came the hard part. What to do with this information. He could send a quick email, something professional but friendly. Nothing flirty. Nothing that would make her think he was a creep. He opened a blank message and stared at the cursor. Hi Candice. Great seeing you at the event. No. Too presumptuous. They barely spoke. Hi Candice. I wanted to follow up on the discussion about... What discussion? They didn't have one. Chris groaned and deleted the draft. This was ridiculous. He wasn't a teenager writing love notes in math class. He was a grown man who wanted a real connection, not a gimmick. Still, he couldn't shake the thought. Maybe this was a chance worth taking. Maybe she was the kind of person who valued loyalty and honesty, the things he'd been searching for. He closed his laptop and made himself a promise. If he reached out, it would be genuine. No games. No cheesy lines. Just honesty. And maybe, just maybe, a cup of coffee that didn't involve awkward silence. Chapter 6. The coffee meeting. Candice Allen stared at the email on her screen, rereading it for the third time. Hi Candice. I hope you're doing well. I wanted to follow up on the networking event and see if you'd be open to grabbing coffee sometime to discuss potential collaboration. It was professional, polite, no weird emojis or hey gorgeous nonsense. Just normal, refreshingly normal. She tapped her pen against the desk, debating. Coffee wasn't a date. Coffee was neutral territory. And technically, it was work-related. She could justify this. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard before typing back. Hi Chris, thanks for reaching out. Coffee sounds good. How about Thursday afternoon? She hit send before she could overthink it, then immediately overthought it anyway. Thursday arrived faster than expected. Candice walked into the cafe, scanning for a man with dark hair and a polite smile. She spotted him near the window, nursing a cup of coffee like it held the secrets of the universe. He stood when he saw her, offering a warm smile that made her stomach do an annoying little flip. Candice. Yes, she said, returning the smile. Chris. That's me. He gestured to the chair across from him. Thanks for meeting me. No problem, she said, sliding into the seat. I needed an excuse to escape my inbox. Chris chuckled. I hear that. Mine looks like a crime scene. Candice laughed, relaxing a little. So, collaboration? Right? Chris said, leaning forward. I thought there might be some overlap between our projects. But honestly, he hesitated, then smiled sheepishly. I also just wanted to talk to someone who didn't use the word synergy, like it's a magic spell. Candice grinned. You mean you're not here to leverage cross-functional paradigms? Chris laughed, and it was a good laugh, warm, genuine, the kind that made her want to hear it again. Not unless you insist, he said. They ordered drinks, her usual tea, his black coffee, and the conversation flowed easier than Candice expected. They talked about work, sure, but it quickly veered into personal territory. So, Chris said, stirring his coffee, what do you do when you're not saving the corporate world? Candice smirked. Sleep, occasionally read. Avoid dating apps like they're radioactive. Chris raised an eyebrow. Not a fan of swiping? Not a fan of wasting time, she said. If I'm going to be with someone, it's because I see a future. Not because they have a cute dog in their profile picture. Chris nodded slowly. I get that. Loyalty matters. Candice's eyes flicked up, surprised. You believe that? Absolutely, Chris said, his tone firm. I've been burned before. I don't play games. Something in his voice made her chest tighten. Not in a bad way, but in a way that felt safe. She smiled faintly. That's rare these days. Maybe, Chris said, meeting her gaze. But some things shouldn't be negotiable. For a moment, the noise of the cafe faded. It was just them, two people who'd been disappointed enough times to know what they wanted, and what they wouldn't settle for. Candice broke the silence with a teasing grin. So, tell me, are you allergic to TikTok? Chris laughed. Completely. I break out in hives if someone says, influencer. Candice laughed too, and it felt good, better than good. It felt like possibility. As they left the cafe, Chris held the door for her. Thanks for meeting me, he said. Thanks for not saying synergy, she replied. He grinned. Next time, I'll try to work it into a sentence. Next time? She echoed, arching a brow. Chris smiled, a little hopeful, a little cautious. If you're up for it. Candice hesitated just long enough to make him sweat, then smiled. We'll see. Chapter 7. Sparks and doubts. Candice Allen stared at the ceiling. Her laptop closed for once, a cup of chamomile tea cooling on the nightstand. She should have been working. There were emails to answer, reports to review. But her mind kept drifting back to the cafe. Chris. She replayed the conversation like a favorite scene from a movie. The way he laughed when she teased him about TikTok. The way his voice softened when he said loyalty wasn't negotiable. It wasn't just what he said, it was how he said it. Like he meant it. Like he'd lived it. Candice pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders, annoyed at herself for smiling. This wasn't supposed to happen. She had rules, boundaries, a career that demanded every ounce of her energy. Relationships were messy, unpredictable, and time-consuming. And yet, she sighed, reaching for her phone. A new message from Lena lit up the screen. Lena? So? Coffee guy? Bill. Candice hesitated, then typed, Candice. It was, nice. Lena. Nice? That's code for, I'm already planning our wedding. Candice laughed out loud. Candice, stop. It was just coffee. Lena. Coffee is how all great love stories start. Unless you're British, then it's tea. Candice shook her head, smiling despite herself. She set the phone down, but the doubts crept in like shadows. What if this was a distraction? What if he wasn't who he seemed? She'd been wrong before, painfully wrong. Trust was earned, not given. And she wasn't sure she was ready to start earning again. Across town, Chris Bennett was at the gym, pretending to care about his workout while his mind replayed every second of the coffee meeting. He'd gone in expecting polite small talk and maybe a quick exit. Instead, he got her. Candice was sharp, funny, and refreshingly real. No fake enthusiasm, no shallow chatter about trending hashtags. Just honesty. And that smile, God, that smile. It had been stuck in his head all day. He racked the weights and sat on the bench, wiping sweat from his forehead. Nate's voice echoed in his memory. Sounds like fate. Or bad networking skills. Chris chuckled under his breath. Fate? Maybe. But he wasn't about to rush this. He'd learned the hard way that rushing led to disaster. He wanted something real, something that lasted, and that meant patience. Still, he couldn't help wondering if she felt the same spark. Or if she'd already filed him under nice guy, but no thanks. His phone buzzed. A work email. He ignored it. For once, work could wait. He opened his messages and stared at the blank screen, debating whether to send a simple text. Had a great time today. Too soon? Too casual? Too cliché? Chris sighed, tossing the phone back into his bag. He'd wait. Just a little. Because if Candice was the kind of woman he thought she was, she deserved more than a rush text. She deserved effort. And maybe, just maybe, he was ready to give it. Chapter 8. The group hang. Candice Allen stared at her phone, thumb hovering over the screen. Lena had been relentless all week, insisting Candice join her and a few friends for trivia night at a cozy bar downtown. Candice had resisted. Work deadlines, exhaustion, the usual excuses. But Lena had countered with the ultimate weapon. Guilt. Lena, you owe me. Remember when I helped you move in August? Candice, fine. But if the trivia questions involve TikTok trends, I'm leaving. Lena, deal. And bring coffee guy. Candice blinked at the last message. Candice. Excuse me? Lena. You know who I mean. Chris. Invite him. Candice hesitated. Was that too soon? They'd only had coffee once. But the thought of seeing him again made her stomach flutter in a way spreadsheets never did. She typed quickly before she could overthink it. Hey Chris, a few friends and I are doing trivia night Thursday. Want to join? His reply came faster than expected. Sounds fun. Count me in. Candice stared at the screen, smiling like an idiot. She hated that Lena was right. Thursday night, the bar was buzzing with laughter and clinking glasses. Candice arrived early, scanning the room for Lena. She spotted her waving from a corner booth, surrounded by two other friends, Maya and Jordan, both armed with cocktails and competitive energy. Finally, Lena exclaimed as Candice slid into the booth. We were about to start without you. Candice rolled her eyes. Relax. I'm here. And Lena's grin widened. Is he coming? Candice opened her mouth to respond, but the answer walked in wearing a navy button-down and that same warm smile that had been haunting her thoughts all week. Chris. He spotted her instantly and made his way over, looking effortlessly confident without trying too hard. Candice stood to greet him, suddenly aware of Lena's smug expression. Hey, Chris said, his voice smooth but casual. Hope I'm not late. Perfect timing, Candice replied, gesturing to the booth. Everyone, this is Chris. Introductions flew around the table, and Chris slid in beside Candice. Lena shot her a look that said you're welcome, and Candice ignored it with the grace of someone plotting revenge later. The first trivia round began and chaos ensued. Maya was shouting answers before the question ended. Jordan was Googling under the table and getting caught. And Lena was heckling the opposing team like a sports commentator. Chris leaned toward Candice, his voice low and amused. Is it always this intense? Always, Candice said, grinning. Lena takes trivia very seriously. Last time, she threatened to disown me for missing a question about 90s boy bands. Chris laughed. That's harsh. She meant it, Candice deadpanned. I still have emotional scars. Their banter flowed easily, punctuated by laughter and playful jabs. When Candice nailed a question about classic literature, Chris raised his glass in mock salute. Impressive. I was about to guess Harry Potter for everything. Candice smirked. Old strategy. Halfway through the night, the bar erupted in laughter when Jordan accidentally answered a question with the name of his ex. Lena nearly fell off her chair, and Chris leaned closer to Candice, his shoulder brushing hers. Remind me never to play trivia with your friends unless I want my personal life exposed, he murmured. Candice chuckled, feeling the warmth of his presence. Consider this your warning. For a moment, their eyes met, and the noise around them faded. It wasn't dramatic, no violins, no slow motion, but it was real, comfortable, like maybe this wasn't just coffee and trivia, like maybe this was the start of something. As the night wound down and the group spilled out into the cool evening air, Lena shot Candice a look that screamed you two have chemistry. Candice ignored her again, but inside, she knew Lena wasn't wrong. Chris walked beside her, hands in his pockets. Thanks for inviting me, he said. I had a great time. Glad you came, Candice replied, smiling. You didn't even flinch when Lena started yelling at strangers. Chris grinned. I'm adaptable. Candice laughed softly. Good to know. They lingered for a beat too long before parting ways, and as Candice headed home, her phone buzzed with a message from Chris. Next time, I'm picking the category. Prepare to lose. Candice smiled, typing back. Bring it on. Chapter 9. Vulnerability. The city was quiet, the kind of quiet that only came after midnight when even the traffic seemed to take a nap. Candice walked slowly along the riverfront, her heels dangling from one hand, her phone in the other. Trivia night had ended hours ago, but she wasn't ready to go home yet. The laughter, the teasing, the way Chris's shoulder brushed hers, it all lingered like a pleasant echo. Her phone buzzed. A message from Chris. Still awake? Candice smiled, typing back. Barely. You? Wide awake. Want some company? She hesitated, then glanced around. The riverfront was calm, well-lit, and safe. And truthfully, she wanted to see him. Sure. I'm by the fountain. Chris arrived 10 minutes later, hands shoved into his jacket pockets. His smile easy but his eyes searching hers like he was checking for permission to stay. Hey, he said softly. Hey, Candice replied, tucking her phone away. Couldn't sleep? Not really, Chris admitted, falling into step beside her. Too much on my mind. They walked in silence for a moment, the sound of water trickling from the fountain filling the space between them. Finally, Candice spoke. Trivia night was fun, she said. Chris grinned. Fun and humiliating. I still can't believe I thought Shakespeare wrote The Great Gatsby. Candice laughed, the sound warm in the cool night air. That was impressive. Impressively wrong, Chris said, chuckling. But hey, at least I made you laugh. You did, Candice admitted, her smile fading into something softer. It's been a while since I laughed like that. Chris glanced at her, his expression curious but gentle. Bad week. Bad few years, Candice said before she could stop herself. She winced. Sorry. That sounded dramatic. Not dramatic, Chris said quietly. Honest. Candice looked at him, surprised by the lack of judgment in his tone. Most people would have brushed it off or cracked a joke. Chris just listened. She exhaled slowly. I've been cheated on before, more than once, and I guess it made me cautious. Chris nodded, his jaw tightening slightly. I get that. You do. Yeah. He shoved his hands deeper into his pockets. I've been through my share of disasters too. Rejection, humiliation, disrespect, you name it. I don't tolerate it anymore. Candice studied him, the sincerity in his voice wrapping around her like a blanket. So you believe in loyalty? Absolutely, Chris said, his tone firm. When people show you who they are, believe them the first time. That's my rule. Candice smiled faintly. That's a good rule. They stopped near the railing, the river shimmering under the streetlights. For a moment, neither spoke. It wasn't awkward, it was peaceful. Chris broke the silence with a crooked grin. So, deal breakers? Candice laughed softly. 2. Life together and loyalty. That's it. Chris nodded. Same here. Well, plus no TikTok obsession. Candice laughed again, the sound bubbling up like champagne. Noted. As they stood there, Candice realized something she hadn't felt in years. Safe. Not because Chris was perfect. She didn't believe in perfect. But because he seemed real. Grounded. The kind of man who meant what he said. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like enough. Chapter 10. The misunderstanding. Candice Allen was having one of those rare good days. The kind where deadlines behaved, emails didn't multiply like rabbits, and her boss actually said, "Great work." She left the office early, humming softly as she walked toward her favorite cafe. A cup of tea and a quiet corner sounded like heaven. She pushed open the door, the familiar scent of roasted coffee beans wrapping around her like a hug. And then she froze. Chris was there. Not just Chris, Chris with a woman. A stunning brunette in a sleek blazer, laughing at something he said. They were sitting close, their heads bent together over a laptop. Candice's stomach dropped like an elevator with cut cables. She told herself it was nothing. Business meeting. Collaboration. Totally innocent. But then the brunette touched his arm lightly, and Candice felt heat rush to her cheeks. Not the good kind. Of course, she thought bitterly. Too good to be true. Should have known. She turned on her heel before they could see her, her pulse pounding like a drum. Outside, the cool air slapped her face, but it didn't calm the storm brewing inside. Chris glanced up just in time to catch a glimpse of someone leaving. A flash of auburn hair, a familiar silhouette. Candice? He blinked, startled, but she was gone before he could react. Chris. The brunette's voice pulled him back. You okay? Yeah, he said quickly, forcing a smile. Just thought I saw someone I know. He tried to refocus on the presentation, but his mind was spinning. If that was Candice, why did she leave so fast? Did she think? Chris clenched his jaw. He hated assumptions, hated the games people played when communication could solve everything. But he also knew Candice had trust scars. If she saw him like this, he sighed inwardly. This was going to be a problem. Candice stormed into her apartment, tossing her bag onto the couch like it had personally betrayed her. She paced the living room, anger and disappointment tangling in her chest. You were careful, she told herself. You didn't rush. You didn't let your guard down completely. And still, her phone buzzed. A message from Chris. Hey, hope your day's going well. Want to grab dinner this weekend? Candice stared at the screen, her fingers itching to type something sharp. Instead, she set the phone down and walked away. She needed space. She needed clarity. Because if loyalty was non-negotiable, then even the appearance of betrayal felt like a deal-breaker. Chapter 11. Clearing the air, Candice Allen stared at her phone for the third time that morning, Chris's unanswered dinner invitation glowing like a neon sign of guilt. She hadn't replied. Not because she didn't want to, but because every time she thought about saying yes, The image of him with that brunette flashed in her mind like a warning light. She tossed the phone onto the couch and muttered, "You're overreacting." Her conscience shot back. Or maybe you're protecting yourself. Before she could spiral further, the phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a text, it was a call. "Chris." Candice froze. Ignore it? Answer it? She hated games, and ignoring him felt like one. With a deep breath, she swiped to accept. "Hello? Candice." His voice was calm, steady, but there was an edge of concern. "Did I do something wrong?" Candice closed her eyes. "Honesty. No games. I saw you yesterday, at the cafe. With someone." There was a pause, then a soft laugh, surprised, not mocking. "You mean Emily?" Candice's stomach tightened. "So she has a name." "She does," Chris said gently. "She's my cousin. We were working on a presentation for her firm." Candice blinked. "Your cousin?" "Last I checked," Chris said, his tone warm with humor. "Unless my family tree is lying to me." Candice felt heat rush to her cheeks. "Wow. Okay. I might have jumped to conclusions." "Hey," Chris said softly. "I get it. You've been hurt before. So have I. But if something bothers you, just ask me. No guessing games." Candice exhaled slowly, tension melting like ice in sunlight. "You're right. I should have asked." "Good," Chris said, his voice lighter now. "Because if you'd written me off over Emily, my mom would have killed me for losing a chance with someone who actually laughs at my bad jokes." Candice laughed, the sound bubbling up despite her embarrassment. "Your jokes aren't that bad." "Careful," Chris teased. That almost sounded like a compliment. Candice smiled, sinking into the couch. "Thank you for explaining." "Thank you for answering," Chris replied. "So, about that dinner?" Candice hesitated for only a second this time. "Dinner sounds good." "Great," Chris said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "No cousins this time. Promise." Candice laughed again, feeling lighter than she had in weeks. Maybe trust wasn't instant, but maybe it didn't have to be. Maybe it just had to start somewhere. Chapter 12. The Leap. Chris Bennett stood in the aisle of the bookstore, staring at a wall of novels like they held the answer to life's biggest question. How do you tell someone you're falling for them without sounding like a walking cliché? He wanted this to be thoughtful, not flashy. Candice wasn't the type to swoon over grand gestures or Instagram-worthy theatrics. She valued sincerity. So he picked a hardcover of her favorite author. He remembered her mentioning it during trivia night and tucked a handwritten note inside the first page. "Candice, you said possibilities sound exhausting. I think they sound like hope, and I'd like to explore that hope with you. Dinner tonight? No cousins, no trivia, just us." He closed the book, his heart thudding like a drum, and headed to the cafe where they'd first met. It felt symbolic, full circle, like the universe was giving him a wink. Candice walked in later that evening, expecting a simple dinner. Instead, she found Chris waiting at a corner table, a small gift bag beside him, and that smile, the one that made her stomach flip every time. "What's this?" she asked, sliding into the seat. Chris pushed the bag toward her. "Open it." Candice raised a brow but obeyed, pulling out the book. Her fingers brushed the cover, and something inside her softened. "You remembered." "Of course," Chris said, his voice low but steady. "Check the first page." She opened it, eyes scanning the note. By the time she finished, her throat felt tight. Not in a bad way, but in the way that happens when walls start to crumble. She looked up, meeting his gaze. "You're really doing this?" Chris smiled, a little nervous now. "I am, because I meant what I said the other night. Loyalty, honesty, they're non-negotiable for me. And I think you feel the same." Candice laughed softly, shaking her head. "You're making it very hard to stick to my no distractions rule." "Good," Chris said, grinning. "Rules are meant to be broken." Candice rolled her eyes, but her smile betrayed her. "You're insufferable. And yet," Chris teased, "you're still here." She laughed, the sound warm and unguarded. "I guess I am." Dinner was easy, laughter, teasing, stories that spilled out like secrets shared under a blanket of trust. No games, no pretense. Just two people who'd been burned before, daring to believe in something real. As they stepped out into the cool night, Chris reached for her hand. Not forcefully, not hesitantly, but like it was the most natural thing in the world. Candice let him, her fingers curling around his like they'd been waiting for this all along. For the first time in years, she didn't feel exhausted by possibilities. She felt excited. Chapter 13. Epilogue. 6 months later, Candice Allen woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of someone humming off-key in her kitchen. She stretched lazily, sunlight spilling across the bed like a golden invitation to start the day. For once, she didn't feel the familiar weight of deadlines pressing against her chest. Today was hers. She padded into the kitchen barefoot, hair a mess, wearing one of Chris's shirts because it was soft and smelled faintly of him. He was at the counter, pouring coffee into 2 mugs, his humming morphing into something that might have been a song, if you squinted hard enough. Candice leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, smiling. "You know, if you're auditioning for a band, you're going to need a backup plan." Chris turned, grinning like he'd been caught stealing cookies. "Good morning to you too. Morning, she said, walking over to steal a sip from his mug. Perfect. Of course, Chris said, mock offended. I've had 6 months of training. Candice laughed, settling onto a stool. 6 months. Hard to believe. Chris slid the second mug toward her and leaned on the counter. Hard to believe you still haven't beaten me at trivia. Candice narrowed her eyes. I let you win. Sure, Chris teased. Keep telling yourself that. She rolled her eyes, but her smile lingered. This easy banter, this quiet domesticity, was what she'd once thought impossible. Not because she didn't want it, but because she didn't believe it could exist without chaos, without heartbreak. Yet here it was, simple and steady, like a well-brewed cup of tea. Chris reached for the book on the counter, the same one he'd given her months ago. He flipped it open to the first page, where his note still rested like a promise kept. You know, he said softly. I meant every word. Candice met his gaze, warmth blooming in her chest. So did I. He smiled, that same smile that had undone her defenses at a cafe half a year ago. Ready for the next chapter? Candice grinned, lifting her mug in a toast. As long as it doesn't involve TikTok. Chris laughed, clinking his mug against hers. Deal.